Hello, morning. Okay, here's switch it on. Okay, this is, wow, that's a lot of people. You guys wake up early. I finished my slides early this morning. That was my creative morning. It's a wonder I got up. Good morning. Thanks for having me. My name's Mark, okay. Initially, I think about 2 days ago, I gave Ren my slides, and she was like, could you come up with something more personal? So I was like, okay, let's not recycle slides. Let's make some new ones. And I mean, typically I share in sort of like a more kind of like proper kind of formal events. And it's really about kind of design thinking, experience design, all this kind of stuff I did. But she told me about the kind of nature of the morning. And she said, hey, it might be just, maybe you could think about sharing a little bit of your story and a bit of your journey, and maybe that would be something nice to share. So that's what I'm going to do. And so the kind of like formality she gave about what I do with all my work, it might probably end at that. And today what I'm going to do is probably share with you a little bit about myself and my doodles. And the title of the talk is really the importance of being honest. Okay? And the second title is really about some of my doodles. Okay? And hopefully that will be something nice to go along with your cup of coffee in the morning, okay? Okay, so the nature of my talk today is really about just sharing you my journey, about how I got to where I am, okay? And what I did yesterday night, I was kind of like went back and recently I kind of reorganized my studies, so I was able to kind of like dig out all these old sketchbooks of mine. And my wife, when I got married about 3 years ago, she told me to stop throwing out your sketchbooks. So what I've done is I began to kind of collect them, and then I was kind of flipping back, right? And going back and seeing really from the day I actually, from my pre-university days, and when I first applied to architecture school, and sort of just really being able to think through about the journey, and really by grace, how I got here. And what I did was, this was actually the title cover of my portfolio when I applied to university. And this is for some background. If you're a Singaporean, I went to a junior college, and during my time, I don't know how it is here, but no one really put any emphasis on art. I wanted to do art. I did art in junior college. There were 2 people in my art class, me and someone else. And that shows you how important art was. And the other person, a friend of mine, went on to become a filmmaker, and I did art, and I did it in a certain way, and they didn't appreciate it. I didn't do very well. But when I went to architecture school, I felt like I wanted to be able to just kind of share a little bit about what I did. So because I didn't have great grades, this was actually the opening page for my portfolio, which I put together. I said, let's be honest, I'm not a full-time art student. I wish I was, but I ain't. I didn't have SOTA, right? And thus you'll not find any pictures of large towering sculptures or elaborately framed oil paintings. Instead, you'll be perusing through many doodles, and there's the occasional final year project and various class assignments that have been wise not to discard. Most of the pieces you will find have been painted in the duration of watching Northern Exposure or some other late night sitcom. If you know Northern Exposure, I know how old you are. It is thus impossible to include 10 to 15 of my best pieces in this holder. Instead, I've tried to show you the broad range of my works. I hope you don't mind and enjoy the ride. And I just really put out there what I doodled. So this is one of my doodles. It was actually a Christmas card I did in 1994. Oh God, that's a different century. And I was just really kind of very honest. I just said, hey, I felt I needed a change from the traditional kind of like babe in the manger, and I just really kind of put my heart out there. I gave him another doodle. I started drawing paper clips, and I said, I was the only one in class who used ink in the still life drawing. I still got a C. But I said, I hope you like it, right? and I drew my application essay. Because people had grades and all sorts of elaborate portfolios, I figured my one chance is to actually write my essay. So I drew it, and I said, well, I want to go to architecture school, and I said, what have I been doing in my life? And somehow it hit a note, right? And they let me in. So I went to school in the States. I had the best time. Some of you all who know, my grandmother actually, because I went to a very good college. It was very expensive. If anyone knows about this place called Cornell, it's Ivy League. It's a really good school. I got in somehow, but it was really expensive, and most people who go are scholars or people who really are well funded. My grandmother, who lived with us, she basically gave me all her money so I could go to school. And you kind of owe her that, right? So I got in, and I had a really good time. And in my 4th year, I actually did an art project. And my art project, I was living in Rome with a whole bunch of people. That's what we do in our 4th year. And I actually had to do an art project, and I created this thing called kennel. And it was actually in the basement of this building that we were living in, and where the artist studio was. And I created this, created an installation in the bathroom. And it's called kennel. And what I did was I actually, you would come in, this is the door, you come in and it says, what is your kennel? And you read all these beautiful stories. Have you heard of this author, Italo Calvino? He's written this book called Invisible Cities, right? So there are these beautiful kind of chapters about cities. And what I did was I kind of like took these chapters and I put it on the door, and I replaced all the words people with the words dogs, and all the words cities with the word kennels. And so somehow you would go into this bathroom and you just would read these beautiful stories about dogs in the kennels. And I stole all my classmates' discarded architectural models, and I put it on the wall and put little dogs there. And somehow you felt that while you're using the loo, that someone went through a lot of trouble to design very elaborate kennels for some dogs. And I said, what is, and this was really what, next to the kind of toilet paper holder, it would have this dog, and these, what would be fleas would actually be little people, and it says, what is your kennel? And what is your, and how, and I would invite people to draw on the wall about what they felt. So people drew things like boats, their girlfriend, their home, things that were comforting to them. And I actually did okay for the project. And what I went on is I also obsessed with this kennel thing, and I started to draw these kind of like little houses that will house things. And in my 5th year, I drew this sort of, out of Rome, I actually drew this huge, long sort of like street that we're living on. And I kind of like reimagined it as a place where people could kind of like, kind of live in and crawl around and sort of play. And then I went on and I started to create more and more buildings. I started to create these little kind of odd buildings that were, in my mind, little kennels. And they had, I'm an architect, right? But I'm an architect with a kind of odd sense of humor. So I would sort of make these things that would have little people in it, and I would just be kind of obsessed about these kennels. And actually what I did for my architecture thesis was I actually created a project about stories and sort of like buildings, and really kind of did something that I really enjoyed and I was honest about, and didn't really think very much about what kind of grade I would get. So because I didn't think very much about the grade I would get, I didn't get the best grade. But what I did was I did a thesis that I really enjoyed. I did a thesis called Can Architecture Tell a Story? And that was something I realized that in my heart was something that was very, very important to me. So I came back to Singapore, I started working. I worked in my first company, and we were able to work on this project. I was the designer for this project called the Majestic Hotel. I'm not sure if some of you might remember. But what was fun was that I'm not going to go through the building that much, even though I did some kind of drawings about kind of figuring out what the building would be and how it could be quite fun. But I was able to find another opportunity to draw again. So I drew a kind of like a picture of Singapore. And this was kind of like, the doodles become more elaborate, right? And so this is Singapore, this is Raffles City, Boat Quay, Esplanade, and all the way down to Marina Square. And in my drawings, as we got to know the client, he said, hey, why don't you design and do the artwork for one of the rooms? So I was able to do that. So I did this room. There's a room called the Singapore room, and really there's kind of really happy image about Singapore in there. And again, right, I think for me, the drawings always kind of represent an honesty, which I felt was very important for me and the work that we did. So what I did was, with that, the client was like, hey, I really like what you do, why don't I give you another project? And I said, why don't you just come out? And I thought about it. I had some other projects, and I said, okay, let me start out on my own. So I took a part-time teaching job at the Polytechnic. I had a fistful of projects, and I came out and I started first company. And I've always been interested in people. I've always been interested in just wanting to create sort of like interesting experiences for people. And I've always been interested in stories. So I created, the first company I started was, of course, called Kennel. And, but because we still had to do architectural work, right? And when I first applied to the Board of Architects and I said I wanted to register Kennel as a company, I got rejected 3 times. Because the Board of Architects says that's not a very serious name. And after the 3rd time, I figured that if I'm going to get rejected again, I'm not going to be able to start work. So we came up with another company name. It's called Annex A. But with this Kennel, I put the word experience design and strategy. I gave the cards to people. People said, what the hell is this? No one really knows what you're doing. But we kind of soldiered on. And I was able to, and this company was actually first to be able to just investigate people and try to understand honestly how people felt about things and what they wanted. And this was, of course, to build it, right? And along the way, and just really pursuing my heart and just being able to do things with people that I loved, down the road, I was able to meet my now partner Ken in the back, and we started this company called Union. And then Ken is actually a filmmaker who loves stories. I think that's definitely a godsend. And now we run the experience design studio in Ong and Ong. It's called OXD. And OXD because I think Ken came out with it, the idea of like in short form, right? That's a kiss and that's a smile, and the O is it's a heart, is it? It's a hug, okay? And somehow we're just trying to be like, can we find a way to do things honestly? And what we started to do, we continued and started to design experience. And that's something that we've been very, very fascinated with all the time. That's been our love, really. And what is experience? And that's something that we've always really wondered. And so me, Ken the filmmaker, and a whole bunch of us started to think, can we actually design these things? And the reason why I did this was I practiced as an architect for about 5 years before I came out. Right? And if you're in design, maybe you're in graphic communication design, you're in interiors, you're in product, whatever, you realize that you may design something beautiful, but that doesn't mean that the whole experience would be great. So we design these beautiful buildings, but somehow you go in and you're like, why wasn't the experience great? Because there's a combination, we realize, of a whole bunch of things. An experience, which is like what you have here right now, we feel it's a combination of your environment, so that's all the physicality, right? You have interiors, architecture, virtual environment, you can't escape that now. Combination of that, communications, you're a comms designer, all the branding and messaging and all that, right? The hub and all these things all actually convey a sense of emotion. The service design, maybe the coffee guy in the morning smiled at you and kind of like said something really nice, somehow that added to the experience. And all the things that you don't see, right? The process, right? The organization, the Ren and team for CreativeMornings, right? I mean, all that you don't see. I was sitting here and Ren said to me, I don't really know all the things that go on behind the scenes to actually set up an event till I started this thing. And I'm like, well, the truth is that no one knows, but how it goes on smoothly, the kind of leadership, the culture, all these things add to the experience. And what we realized there is that we're really honest and we try to really understand what people want. You could begin to design systems for that. So why? We feel that I feel that great experiences are elegant combination of environment, communications, and process. Grounded in values. What are your values? Towards vision that serve people's needs. And that's something very, very funnily enough for architects we don't really think about. You'd be surprised, for architects who design, most architects design things for themselves as opposed for others. That's the irony of it. And but somehow we felt that that's missing. And somehow people are really, really important in this whole equation. So we started working, and this is what we do right now professionally. I'm not going to go too much, but this is what we do with clients. We actually dream with them. We go and talk to people. We interview people. We go and observe with them. We sit and do the same things they do. We prototype these things, and then ultimately we design them. So that's what we do. We've been able, really, it's just been a joy to be able to prototype things like banks, government kind of experiences, the way you buy your home, attractions and things like that. And we do that really fun. We do it with a lot of people. We do it smiling. We talk to people, we kind of act it out, and then we get people's feedback, and then we refine it, and we finally design it. And we've been able to do things like design a new bank this is for OCBC. We've been able to design architecture by talking to people who want to live in the area. We've been able to design, this is the way you donate your blood. And of course, your attractions, right? We just finished this at Sentosa. It's called Port of Lost Wonder. It's for kids. So if you want to go, you have to bring a kid in. And somehow we've been able to kind of take this approach and design honestly for people in a better way. And the last thing that we do that came out organically was this thing called Kennel, and it's back, right? The font has changed, that's all, right? When we came on board, when I and Ken actually took up a directorship about a year ago in this new company, we had our old office space, right? And we had this amazing office manager that's been with us for a while, and we were like, are we going to shut down our office space, right? And it didn't really make sense. So what we did was we said, Ken and I sat down, we said, you know what? We've been collaborating with people all these years, and somehow it doesn't make sense to shut down our office and sell our furniture, right? So what could we do? Could we change it into like a kind of creative community thing? So we said, okay. And long ago, in our old office, because we had a room called Kennel, right? So we took the signage from Kennel and we put it in the front, and we said, let's call our place Kennel. And it kind of works, right? It goes full circle, because Kennel is a place of comfort, a place to hide in, a place to maybe just be. And we created this thing called Kennel, and it's really about building communities and beautiful spaces. And we have a community, and we have a website. It's very much sort of like the hub, right? We have people, and we try to bring in honest people, really. We talk to them and say, why do you want to do what you want to do? And how do you want to do what you want to do with other people around you? And it's really important to us. And many of these people actually end up working with us, which is fabulous. And of course, we have this thing called Caravan, which is a blog where we do these things called Kennel Nights, where we invite people and to have we have mystery speakers to share about their story of failure and success and what it means to do what they do. And that's been the happy thing. I always end up closing my eyes for some reason in public photos. But today I'm able to do that with Ren and Ken. And I just want to, am I almost 20? I have 2 more minutes. Oh, perfect timing. And I end up then with something. I can take 2 minutes to do the slide, right? After this whole journey, what do you learn from it? And the truth is, I realized that the importance of being honest. I think it's really important when you first start off something that you're going to be so tussled with things that you should do because people tell you to do, and things that you want to do even though no one really understands you. And I feel it's really important to be honest with yourself. I think it's also very important to be honest with others. I feel that if you can live life with an open hand, you could be amazed at the harvest. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Mark, for that. And we'll now open the floor for a short Q&A, some questions. Anybody?
Yes.
I have a question. It's kind of a business question, but when you talk to your clients about the process,
Sure.
and you talk about the experiment, the first part where you're going to play with them and spend time seeing what they want, and how how much money do they invest in that, or how do you?
Are you asking me about fees right now?
No, I'm just asking about how you pitch that.
Oh.
The concept is clear, but financially, how do you pitch that? Do you say, well, it's going to cost something?
Oh. Well, I think it's on the premise that a lot of times as a designer, people come to you telling you what they want to do already. I think what we do with the clients is work out with them why they want to do it. And that's really it. So what we do is the clients come to us and just with really open briefs. They might say that I want to engage young people as customers, and I have no idea how to do that. Can you just create something that will allow us to do that? So we create a bank for them. And what we do is we went out, let's say for OCBC, when we created Frank, what we did was we went down and we spoke to people. And we spoke to young people and we just observed and we tried to understand how they relate to money. So what we'll do is we'll talk to people and say, do you save? Do you like to save? Why don't you save? How do you spend your money? How do you manage it? And all that. And through that, we're able to find opportunities. And just kind of like an interesting thing, we found out that when we did that one project, we found out that people were, people who wanted to save money, no, people who really needed to save money. Okay, so there's some people who want to save and some people who really need to save, right? Okay, so people who really need to save, and this is like, you can look at those extreme scenarios, people with like double jobs, triple jobs, they would actually have kind of notepads or crumpled pieces of paper where they have their own system. And they'll kind of jot down what they wanted, what they were saving, and it was not the best, but they kind of did it. And then the others, who were just like, oh yeah, I know it's good to save, but they just don't do it. So obviously it's not that important. And so what we found out was that, hey, people need to learn how to manage their money. So what we did was we worked out with them a system where you can actually, when you open an account, you can actually open up little jars and say, I have this jar, I want to save up $500 for a trip. I have this jar, I want to save up $1,000 for school, and you can actually manage that. And then that's actually a part of the feature of the bank. And these things, I guess, most of the time, I think clients find those insights very valuable. And through that, it helps them to understand why they're doing what they're doing. Yeah, so it's quite structured. And we're very bad at marketing for some reason, but somehow people come to us. I think it makes sense when I don't know, I think clients find it actually quite sensible when you can take them through the process, especially with other projects, yeah. And we don't just work as architects. Ken's a filmmaker, we have business consultants, organizational designers, just people who make life going to work fun, right? But the idea is not to just put all the same people in one room. If I put 5 architects thinking about a bank, that could be a scary bank. But right, I started putting like a film guy, maybe a business person, maybe an organizational designer, then it could be quite fun, interesting. Yeah.
Anyone else? Any questions? Is it too early in the morning? Good.
Hi, just wanted to know, do you ever struggle with honesty?
Yeah, I'm sure you do, right? But you kind of need to do that, to be honest. But yes, I do. But I think it's about realizing that when you do make honest decisions, there's a difference between honesty and wisdom. You gotta think about these things together, right? You don't just be honest and then say stupid things, huh? But I think when we've made honest decisions and sort of like left it to and not tried to when we've made honest decisions, we've actually found a lot of fruit. And in these honest decisions, it's given us the courage to make bigger ones. And honesty is actually ranges from, of course, just being honest with the work and wanting to be able to do work in a certain way, but also honesty ranges about being honest with other people. There's this thing we try to exercise in office called honesty and love, which means that if you're going to be honest with someone, do it in a loving way. There are people who are honest and brutal, honest or insensitive, but honesty and love is really big. So and we want to create an environment where, because you want an environment where people can be honest, right? The worst is that everyone's just smiling in your face, but not really, but you know they're thinking something else about you. But at the same time, if you're just really honest and you're brutal, then there's very little sensitivity, right? So how do you strike that balance? And we're trying to create an environment where we do that. So what we do is, in honesty and love, you're going to tell someone, hey, you know what? You should kind of like figure out this area of your life. Tell them why, if they do that, and how you could help them, and how it could make them better. And that really helps a lot. I mean, you want to grow as an organization as well. And we do, and you know, we've all worked in large offices, and we're trying to avoid some of these kind of cultural and kind of like political environments. And the best, and usually political environments are a result because people don't want to be honest with each other. And so that's what we try to do. Yeah. Is that honest enough? Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Do you see opportunities to integrate architecture and maybe filmmaking or architecture and other fields of art?
Yeah.
In any future projects? Or
Yeah, I hope that's what we're trying to do. Yes, I think architecture is a big thing, right? Because there's so much endeavor to build something, right? And it takes a while. Even if you build a house, it's going to take you 3 years of your life, 2 years maybe. But I think our idea is to be able to kind of build, as we start learning how to build smaller experiences, and we started actually with interiors because, you know, it's easier to kind of build an experience like this. And we kind of learn and how to do it at a larger scale. We're beginning to see that. And so now we're kind of like doing buildings, we're doing experiences on like 10 acres of land, you know, that kind of thing. It's just much bigger, multiple buildings and then weaving things in and all that. So I think we'll get there. I think there's opportunity, and how it ties into film is that film is really about story. And architecture or any environment, you somehow, you know, the thing that sticks with you as a person that uses that space is the story. And there is definitely a link to that. And great stories usually mean good experiences that last in your memory. And how else can you and if you can understand what the narrative is for anyone who moves through a building or moves through a space, and you can learn how to kind of sequence that. The idea is that hopefully you can create transformative experiences that people can remember. So yes, architecture is interesting. My professor once said that architecture is one of those things that it changes you without you even knowing. Because you know, you're in the space and somehow you feel a certain way, but exactly how and why can you pinpoint it? Some people have a better language than others, but not everyone, but somehow it affects you. So I think if we can begin to kind of work on that scale, that would be wonderful. Our aim is to be able to kind of create towns and cities. And that would really mean something. Yeah.
Your interests are very diverse, and your experiences stretch across several fields. So in explaining what you do to new people, how do you put it across? Because it's the kind of thing that can either work against you or maybe.
Yeah. You need slides. No. Yeah, actually for a long time we kind of like figured out what to tell people. People ask me, for a season I was just like, you know, I'm just an architect. And then I design experiences. I mean, it's interesting because, you know why? I think the big thing is because what we're doing is kind of new. So you kind of have to explain a little bit more. And we've kind of summed it out as we created, I think our aim is just to design experiences for people that will hopefully improve their life. And then after that, it's a lot easier to kind of share people in a little bit more detail, specifically according to what their need is. So you're right, if I said lawyer, you would know what that means. If I said design experiences, right? But I think we're getting there. And yeah, I don't have a good answer for your question. You asked a lousy question in the morning. Sorry. Yeah, not going to answer you. Yeah, we design experiences. Okay, I know. This is something I've done before, okay? So oftentimes when people ask me, one thing I've used quite well was, especially when I go and we meet clients with, sometimes I work with a business consultant. She's an organizational designer. She designs organizations. So when clients come to us and says, you design experiences, what does that mean? And I said, well, if you think of an experience, I'll design all the things that you see and you feel, and she'll design all the things that you don't see but you feel. And they kind of understand.
I have one question. How do you get inspired for new ideas?
Okay, for me, I'm kind of like an introvert, extrovert. What's that word? Introvert. There's a word for it.
Ambivert.
It's an ambivert. I just found out I'm an ambivert. So because of that, I do need downtime and quiet time. And how I realized I get inspired was, it's when I'm by myself, when I go and swim. Not look at the phone. And I think really rest. And I do that. And my wife's got that figured out. Whenever I need to do anything big, she'll like say, go and swim. And she'll kind of come up with me. 8 out of 10 times she will not swim, she'll just sit there. And I'll just kind of like do my thing. And I just need time to kind of think, and somehow things will happen. And the other one is to just have I think it's always important to be childlike, so that you can look at the world around you and always find fascination. Yeah. And I'm curious, so I talk to people. I really try to understand how they feel. And I think that inspires me as well. Yeah. Oh, and laugh. Laugh is big.
I think we've just got a few more minutes for any last questions. Anyone from the back?
I just want to find out, what would you say would be the best service experience that you felt when you travel, when you go around, that inspires you, that makes you go, oh, I wish I had thought of that?
Oh. I mean, there are a number, but I think the one that stands out was, I think I went on a honeymoon. I mean, my honeymoon, we went to Sri Lanka, and we actually had the privilege to stay at a luxury resort called the Aman Resorts. Some of you are familiar. They're just 30 rooms, and they just have some ridiculous like 6-to-1 kind of like ratio for like staff to one person. But something I remember about that was, from the airport, someone has to drive you, and it took us like 2 hours to get there, or some 3 hours. It was long. I mean, it was not in the most kind of accessible of places, and maybe that's the charm, right? And so somehow we got in at 5:30, and someone came up, kind of took our baggage, and then couldn't find him. He disappeared, and then someone came out and kind of gave you a towel and all that stuff. And they checked you in the room. But what was amazing is after he checked you in the room and he left, and we're kind of like unpacking a bit and all that. And then when we opened the door to the veranda, it was about 5:45, 6 o'clock. They had actually opened the windows. I mean, this is a common veranda, and there was not many people in the hotel. They had opened the windows for us. They had put tea, because they knew by the time you came out, it would be sunset. And that you want to be able to look at the sunset and actually have coffee. And I was like, how did they figure that out? So that means the minute they figured out I was coming at 5, they anticipated by the time I'm going to come in the room and leave everything behind, it would just be sort of like sitting. And for me, that was really probably one of the best experiences I had encountered, because it was this kind of huge sense of anticipation that they had that was able to just really kind of make a lasting thing. So, I mean, that's my experience. Yes.
Hi. How will you design a new experience for, say, for example, you mentioned that you want to design cities, right?
Yeah.
So, how will you design a new experience for Singapore?
Oh, okay. Well, we haven't started yet, but are you familiar with this thing called ArchiFest? I mean, some of you all, every year there's this architecture festival in October, okay? It's been going on for 5 years. For some reason this year I'm chairing it. Okay, after much deliberation because we have 1,001 things to do. But I'm chairing ArchiFest, and what we're trying to do is use that festival to actually help rethink the city, so that we can help reimagine our city. I think your answer can be answered in two parts. One is, right, formally, how do we rebuild Singapore? I mean, that's going to take a lot of time, and it's never going to be by one person. But I think what we're really keen to do is, with this festival, be able to think about how we can rethink and reimagine Singapore. And if you think about a city, actually a city is really, I think, characterized by stories and memories, right? Especially now, because there's so many more cities, and there'll be more and more cities, and there'll be more and more people living in cities, okay? So that's just a fact of the matter. And what's gonna kind of differentiate them would be basically almost like why you love one city more than the other. And how do you then create a city that people can love, right? It's a combination of all the things that you see and feel, and all the things that you don't see and you feel, right? So what that means is that it's a combination of buildings, events like this, somehow the food, somehow the smell, chance encounters, all these things. And I think everyone has a part to play in the city. It's not just architects. Farmers have a part to play. You guys have a part to play. Communication designers, florists, people who even kind of like help maintain the grounds, all these people. So what we're trying to do with ArchiFest is create a platform where we can help rethink and reimagine the city. And the way to do that is be able where everyone can actually have fringe events to test out new ideas in the city so that people can experience it for months. So these are new ideas that may not be technically allowed, because maybe if you were to do a formal application, the current laws and guidelines don't allow it, but you could try and test it for a couple of weeks. So take, for example, we do like urban farming, right? We realize that everyone wants to get closer to their food. We could have like a urban farm pop-up for like a month, and then hopefully everyone can go and buy cabbages there or something like that. But hopefully that would kind of like spark the idea that we can rethink about food and having food in the city differently. Could we plant farms on the rooftops and so on and so forth? Or we could do screenings of things and all that. So that's what we're really kind of passionate about, being able to use the month of October to help rethink the city. And hopefully we can do these. See, the thing about it is that there's this whole thing about prototyping. In Singapore, we're used to this thing about figuring everything out and then we do it. Low risk, must get it right, right? But the thing is that you have to test things to see, especially if they're bold ideas. And bold ideas, it is very hard to have like 100% guarantee that it'll work. Great ideas get tweaked along the way. And the idea is that hopefully we can use this festival to prototype a lot of new ideas for the city. Yeah.
And with that, I think we'll close. Thank you, Mark.